Hello and welcome everybody. Um, Today we're going to discuss the topic of recursion. Um, and we've discussed already cases with functions, so we already know how functions work. And for most of the problems that we have been dealing with, they are generally structured. And the structure is quite simple. So you divide your program into smaller tasks that you then sublet or outsource to function, and those functions perform some tasks and then they return a certain value. However, sometimes it is useful to employ functions that call themselves. So normally what you have been seeing up to this point is a function always calls some other function, but there are some cases when there are some problems where it actually makes sense for a function to call itself, and a function that calls itself either directly or indirectly through another function is what is called a recursive function. Okay, now recursion is generally considered to be a complex topic which will be discussed in more detail in later parts of this course, so we will keep coming back to it, but now we've covered enough material where we can actually look at some simple examples of recursion and see or develop a basic understanding at least of how recursion works. And so you will see it later on in chapters 12 and even in appendix, and we will keep coming back to this. But right now we're going to look at some of the basics of how to solve problems recursively using recursive functions. Now, in what scenarios do we apply recursion, or how do we apply recursion? Well, a recursive function normally breaks down a more complex problem into two smaller conceptual pieces. So it breaks down a more complex problem into two pieces, or two parts: the simpler part, which it knows how to do, and the more complicated part, which at that particular time it does not know how to do, right? And it leaves it for later function calls, right? And that's basically how it works. So now this may sound a little abstract, but it will become clear when we look at a few examples. Now you could think of if I were to give you a simple analogy, you could think of recursion as building a house. Now if you're building a house, it's a complex structure which has lots of rooms that look differently and have different sizes and things like that. But if you keep breaking it down to simpler and simpler and simpler problems, what you are actually starting off with when you're building a house is basically just connecting a set of bricks. So you're starting off with one brick, and then you're attaching another brick on top of it, and then you're kind of going from a very simple task to a more complex task, right? So that's what you're doing with recursion as well. So you have a complex problem, you break it down into more complex part and a simple part. The simple part you do right away, and then the more complex part you do in the next call of the function, right? And so this breakdown needs to be done in a manner so it resembles the original problem, right? But you break it down into a slightly more simpler version. So you have a complex part, you break it down into a problem, you break it down into two parts, both of which are less complex than the previous one. One is more simple and you immediately solve it. The other one is slightly more complex. It still resembles the original complex problem but is slightly more simple. Okay, so once you have solved the simple problem and you've broken it down, then you can go and look at the second part, which was more complex, and then maybe call your function again and take this more complex part and break it down into a further smaller part, right? So you are kind of doing something like this. So if this is your complex problem, you break it down into a simpler problem, right? And another complex problem, you immediately solve the simple part, and then for the complex part you again go back up and you again kind of try to break it down into a simpler part that you will solve, and a much more complex part which is less complex than the one that is on top, but again you can break it down. Now that's how you kind of keep operating. So you basically keep breaking your problem down into two parts until you get to a point where this complex part also becomes so simple that you are able to solve this as well. Okay, now again will become 100% clear when we look at an example, but this is the basic idea. Now recursion step will also include the keyword return, right? Because once you solved all these problems, you would obviously want to return these values to the original callers, and so it's important to have the return step, and you are calling a function from within itself. So you are kind of going in this call stack and you are waiting for the subsequent calls to return a value, and once they do return a value, you pass it back to your caller, which passes it back to its original caller, and that's how you eventually solve the problem. Now for the recursion problem to terminate, we have to ensure that we break the problem down in such a fashion that it eventually our tasks converge to a simple problem. Because if it does not converge onto simpler tasks, what will happen is when we do repeated calls of a function and we keep calling it again and again, the size of our function call stack will keep increasing. And if we keep calling the same function again and again and again, and we do not get to a point where eventually we have what is called a base case, so our complex part also becomes so simple that the function is able to evaluate it. If we do not get to this point, if our function does not really converge to this part, then what will happen is the size of our call stack will become so large that we will run out of memory. So that's the tricky part. We have to ensure that our problem is formulated in a way or set up in a way that it converges into this stage, or we are always in this condition where it is eventually going to turn into something very simple, what is called the base case, and then eventually terminate. Okay, so let's look at an example. And this is an example which often is given as the very first example of recursive function. Now before we solve this problem recursively, we're going to solve it using just conventional programming, in this case using loops. Now pretty much everything that can be solved using recursion can also be solved using some other approach, but typically the sort of solution that you get using recursion is more elegant and perhaps more efficient and even at times easier to understand. So in this case what we're trying to do is to obtain the factorial of a non-negative integer n, and if you recall from your basic math class, n factorial is computed by multiplying the number n with n minus 1 with n minus 2 up till we get to 1. We also know that 0 factorial is defined to be equal to 1, and so the factorial of 5 is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is equal to 120. Now if we want to compute the factorial of a number, we can do that using a for loop. So we start off with factorial variable with the value of 1, then we go with a counter variable. Now counter is the variable that we want to compute the factorial of, right? Or sorry, is equal to the number whose factorial we actually want to calculate. So we basically decrement this number inside the loop, and then every time we are inside the loop body, we are basically multiplying factorial with itself, with its past value and the current value of the counter variable or the loop variable, and this will give us the factorial. Now this problem can also be solved using a recursive manner by just a simple insight. So if you are looking at n factorial, the key thing is to notice that n factorial is basically equal to n times n minus 1 factorial. Okay, so 5 factorial is equal to 5 times 4 factorial, and 4 factorial is equal to 4 times 3 factorial. So you can write this problem in a recursive manner as something like so n minus 1 factorial is basically equal to n minus 1 times n minus 2 factorial, and then n minus 2 factorial is n minus 2 times n minus 3 factorial. So you should be able to see the recursive part here is that you're doing the same thing again and again. So you know the value of n minus 1, but you do not know the value of n minus 2 factorial. But what you can do is you can break this down into n minus 2 factorial is equal to n minus 2 times n minus 3 factorial. Okay, so now let's look at how we can do this using a recursive function. One thing that I want to highlight is that in order to calculate or store the value of the factorial, we're going to be using an unsigned long integer. And why do we want to do that? Well, that's because factorial values can actually become very large very quickly, and they're always positive. So unsigned long integer is the longest type of integer that we can have. So that's why we're using this data type to store our factorial. So what we're going to do now is we're going to write down a recursive function to compute the factorial of integers, and what this function does is if it So it's called on the variable number. So this is the argument that is passed to this function. Now if this argument or the number that is passed to the factorial function, and if this argument is less than or equal to 1, then the function returns 1, and it does not do any further calls to itself, so the program terminates. However, if the number is greater than 1, then what this function does is it takes its argument number, multiplies it, and what it does is multiplies it with whatever the next call of this function is going to return. So it calls itself again, and then as an argument it passes it number minus 1, right? So we have number, if you think about it in the expressions, this is number multiplied by number minus 1 factorial. So this part, number multiplied by something, is the simple part of our task, right? And number minus 1 factorial, this is the now complex part of our task, which at this time we do not know how to do. So we're going to break it down further into another simple task and another slightly more complex task. So again, this time around our simple task on the next call is going to be, we're going to take number minus 1, we're going to multiply it with something, and what is that something? That something is basically the complex part, which is number minus 2 factorial. Okay, and then we keep going until number minus 1 becomes equal to 1, and then once it becomes equal to 1, then we're going to return 1, and that's the point where, you know, we get to the point case where the complex part also becomes so simple that we can solve it, and then we're going to go back up and return values to all the previous instances or calls of the function that, you know, we're calling our function. So we're going back back inside our call stack. Okay, so let's take a look at this graphically. So what we have is, let's look at the example of 5 factorial. So this is how the sequence of calls works. So 5 factorial is, factorial basically invokes the factorial function. We go it and we break it down into the small simple task, which was 5 times, and then this is the complex part, which was 4 factorial. So it calls the function again, which again breaks it down into 4 times, 3 factorial, which again calls the function, which breaks it down into 3 times 3 minus 1, which was 2 factorial, which again breaks it down into 2 times, so simple part times the complex part, which is 1 factorial. And then when we get this call, when we come here, the function says, okay, when I get an argument of 1, what do? Well, I just return 1. So I return 1, so you get 1, you return it back up here, and so you get 1 is returned in your call stack. So it says, okay, now I got 1 back. So I got feedback from the guy who I called, and he returned a value of 1. So I'm going to now multiply 2 times 1, and so return 2, and then when 2 is returned, this guy basically takes 2, multiplies it by 3, and 6 is returned, and the one that called it, it's still in the call stack, so it goes in and it says, okay, I had 4 times, and what was the number I was supposed to multiply 4 with? The function I called tells me I should multiply by 6, so it multiplies by 6, returns 24, 24 goes back up, gets multiplied by 5, 120 is returned, and then 120 is returned, and that's when you get back to the original part of the program which first called the factorial function, and it gets a value of 120, which is then used in the calling part of the program. So that's how it tends to work. Okay, so let's look at a demo of this. So let's look at the program. So our program contains this function factorial, which has an unsigned int argument. It returns an unsigned long int. And what does this program do? Well, it loops through values, integer values. I is from 0 to I is 21, and it computes the values of all of these integers from 0 to 21. So it will print the factorial of 0, then the factorial of 1, then the factorial of 2 and 3 and 4 until it gets to 21. Now you generally are not going beyond 21 because beyond 21 the factorial becomes so large that even unsigned long int cannot store it. Within this program, what are we doing? Well, so once we go inside the body of the loop, we're just printing the number, and we're saying that factorial of that number is equal to the long unsigned integer, which basically is obtained by calling the factorial function. Let's look at the factorial function. The factorial function, what does it do? Well, just as we said, if the number or if its argument is equal to or less than or equal to 1, it will return 1. Otherwise, what will it do? Well, otherwise it will go into recursion. So it will take its argument and it will multiply it with a recursive call, whatever the recursive call to this function is going to return. So it calls itself again, and it basically keeps doing that until you get down to the point where number is 1, and then you kind of trace it back up the stack to get the factorial. Okay, and then here's the result. So here's the sample output. So 0 factorial is 1, 1 factorial is 1, 2 factorial is 2, 3 factorial is 6, and then you keep going and notice that beyond a certain point your numbers start to increase very quickly until you get to 21, where it becomes really large. Okay. So this slides basically just contains information that I have described before. So it talks about the format specifiers. If you're talking about unsigned long integers, this is the format specifier that you have to use. And then yes, we are going to run out of capacity even when using unsigned long integers. Now, one of the weaknesses with C language is that with C language you are just stuck with the data types that it provides you, and you cannot extend or create your own data type, let's say, which would allow you to be able to store even longer numbers or things like that. This is one of the weaknesses of C language. But we'll see later, if when you actually study languages like C++, they actually allow you to overcome this limitation using a data structure called classes. So there you can define your own data structures according to your own needs, and they're a bit more flexible. One of the problems when using recursive functions is you need to remember that you have to return a value from a recursive function when you need to, if you want a program to terminate. And also you have to be careful when applying it to problems. You can run out of memory if you do not break your program down in a correct manner. Now we're going to look at one more example. This is going to be again an example related to recursion, and this is basically dealing with what is called the Fibonacci series. And the Fibonacci series has some very special properties, and its property is, primary property is that the sum of Um, so a subsequent Fibonacci number that you see in this series is the sum of the previous two Fibonacci numbers. So what that means is, if I'm looking at the number 1, it's going to be the sum of the previous two numbers in this series, which is 0 and 1. So the sum of these two will give me the next number. If I'm looking at this particular location, then this is going to be the sum of these two, and similarly this one is the sum of these two. So 3 is 2 plus 1, similarly 5 is also the sum of the two numbers that precede it. So that's a special property of a Fibonacci series. Another property of the Fibonacci series is that they generally converge to a constant ratio known as 1.618. So successive Fibonacci numbers, so numbers that are in successive locations or are right next to each other, they have this ratio, they converge to this ratio of 1.618. And this number occurs really frequently in nature as well, and is called the golden ratio or the golden mean. And we generally tend to find this golden mean aesthetically pleasing. So what that means is, because of this, we generally tend to keep, in architecture, architects generally tend to keep the ratio of the length and width of windows to be equal to the golden mean, because we tend to find that pleasing. Postcards are also often designed to have the golden mean as the length-width ratio. Next what we're going to do is to recursively compute the sum of the Fibonacci series using a recursive function, and this function basically will return 0 when 0 is passed to it. It will return 1 when 1 is passed to it. If any other integer is passed to it, then what it will do is it will call itself. So it will yield, it will issue a recursive call to itself, passing n-1 as the argument, plus another call with n-2 as the argument. And it kind of makes sense right now. So you will basically issue a call. So if you get the number n, you are going to issue a recursive call to n-1 and n-2. And what is n-1 going to do? N-1, if it's not equal to 0 or 1, again n-1 will return a recursive call to the Fibonacci function with n-2 as the argument, and another recursive call with n-3 as the argument, and then we will break these two down as well. So n-2 will again issue a recursive call to the Fibonacci function with n-3 and n-4, and we keep doing this until we get to 0 or 1, and then we're going to kind of return values. Okay, so we have our function here, Fibonacci. Again, we're using unsigned long int as the return variable. We pass an unsigned integer. We ask the user to enter an integer, and then once we get an integer, we basically call the Fibonacci function, which is on the next slide. So on the Fibonacci function, what we have is it returns 0 or 1 if n is equal to either 0 or 1, right? Otherwise, what does it do? Well, it returns, but it basically issues a call to this Fibonacci to itself. So if you get n and n is not 0 or 1, then you're going to get this you're going to go into this recursive step where you call the function again with n minus 1 as the argument, and you're going to issue another call to this function but with n minus 2 as the argument, and then you're going to add whatever these return. Right now, if n and n minus 2 are further away or larger numbers than 0 and 1, then you're going to get a large number of subsequent subcalls further down the line until these numbers are reduced down to 0 and 1. So a good idea might be to actually run this program and see how the call stack works. So this is an example. So if you enter 0, Fibonacci returns 0. If you enter 1, Fibonacci returns 1. If you enter 2, Fibonacci returns 1, and then for 3, and then these are different examples. When you enter 10, then it kind of seems to give you this number 55, which is the sum of the series. You can check these values. And so that's how it basically works. Now let's look at another simple example. So graphically, if we're looking at this, so if we have Fibonacci 3, so this call to Fibonacci 3 basically issues two recursive calls. First one with the argument 2, second one with argument 1. One with argument 1 basically is going to return 1. The one with argument 2 is going to break it down further and going to call again the function with argument 1 and argument 0, and then both of these are going to return, so first one is going to return 1, the second one is going to return 0, and then you're going to kind of go back up the call stack to kind of sum up these numbers. You sum 1 plus 0, return the result, which is 1, and then you're getting 1 from here, and then you add these, and over here you're going to get a value of 2, which is what we did get for an argument of 3. Okay, and so that's how this works. Okay, just one more thing. So as far as the order of evaluation of these function calls is concerned, while evaluating Fibonacci with an argument of 3, two recursive calls will be made, Fibonacci 2 and Fibonacci 1. Now, what order will these calls be made? Well, you might assume that Fibonacci 2 comes first, so it's called first, and 1 is later in the expression, so you're going from left to right in this expression, let's just say. Over here, so this one comes first, so it might be called first, and this one might be executed later or called later. That is not necessarily the case. It's hard to predict, so the compiler does not really specify in which, or we don't really know exactly in which order they will be executed, so just kind of keep that in mind. It's not too important as such, but maybe good to know. Right, one more thing that you want to note about recursive functions is that recursive function calls, the complexity often increases in what is called an exponential order. So it does not, so the number of function calls or recursive function calls does not increase linearly, maybe in this fashion, right? So what they generally increase is what is called an exponential manner, which is basically rising very quickly, and so this is something which can be a bit of a problem. So let's say if you wanted to calculate the 20th Fibonacci number, what that would require is about 2 to the power of 20, or about 1 million recursive function calls. Similarly, computing the 30th Fibonacci number would require about 2 to the power of 30 or a billion function calls. So the complexity or the number of function calls that you have as you kind of increase the number or the argument to the Fibonacci function, that increases very quickly, and it increases in what is called an exponential manner versus a linear manner. So this obviously means that your call stack can increase very quickly. The size of that can increase very quickly. It can also slow down your program. So this is something that is important to note. You will talk about program complexity and discuss exponential complexity in more detail in later courses, but here we're just giving you a basic idea of what that is. Of course, this is just showing you this example that we just showed you an intuitive and appealing solution to calculate the Fibonacci numbers. This is not the best approach or the best way to calculate them, but it kind of easily explains the concept. So they fit in nicely with recursive function calls, so that's why we are using that as an example here. But there are other better ways perhaps of doing it. Now, one more thing that you might be thinking about is, if we compare recursion with iteration. So iteration is doing things using simple loops that we have been doing up till now, right? Why should we go with recursion when we have iteration? And if you compare both approaches, there are kind of pros and cons of both. Both iteration and recursion obviously involve repetition. So when you are going to repeat things, then you should be using either loops or iteration using loops, or the other thing you could do is recursion through repeated function calls. It is important to remember that if you do not terminate or do not set the termination conditions properly, both with iterations and recursions, your program will not terminate and it will continue to go. But the consequences are less severe if you are working with iterations than they are with recursion, because with recursion, if your program does not terminate and you kind of keep keep on proceeding with infinite function calls, what that will do is it will increase the size of your memory stack, and you will run out of memory very quickly. Whereas with iterations, if your loop does not terminate, keeps going, well, it'll just keep going, but the consequences will not be that severe. So this is something that you need to remember. Okay, so recursion does have many negatives. It repeatedly invokes the mechanism, and consequently the overhead of function calls also is something that needs to be kept in mind. So this is expensive both in processor time and memory space, right? Because if you're doing too many function calls, every time you call a new function, you're kind of taking the old one, putting it in the stack and storing its variables in there, and then if you keep doing that, you will run out of memory. So remember this. This is important. So yes, there's only a finite amount of memory space that you have. So if your stack becomes too large, if you're storing too many copies of a function, then it can become complicated. So then you might ask, well, why should we choose recursion? And this is an important question. Some of you might already be thinking about it. Well, we generally use or go with recursion only in cases where recursion is much more natural and makes more sense than the iterative approach, or you could say that the problem is easier to kind of map to a recursive approach than to an iterative approach, right? And those are situations like the Fibonacci that we saw, or the factorial that we saw. These are problems that naturally map to a recursive approach than to an iterative approach. So in those type of scenarios, you may go with the recursive approach just to make your program easier to understand. But do remember that recursion actually does come with its own flaws, and so if performance is something that you need, then you might want to invest the time to actually make your program a little bit more complex to understand, but make it follow an iterative approach rather than a recursive approach. Right, so next figure just summarizes some of the different examples in this book which utilize recursion. So you can look at these in your own time. And these days, you know, again, if you are not too obsessed with performance, you know, maybe you're not working with game design, maybe you're not developing an embedded application where you don't have a lot of memory or a lot of space, performance is not crucial. In those applications you can use recursion, but if performance is something that you need, then perhaps it's a better idea to avoid recursion. Alright, thank you. So I'm going to end here, and I'll see you in the next video.